Donald Trump is sitting on top of $1 trillion that almost nobody is talking about, and he does not have to raise a single tax, cut a single program, or ask Congress for permission to unlock it. It has been sitting in vaults beneath American soil for decades, and right now, inside his administration, there is a serious and growing conversation about reaching for it. I am going to show you exactly what it is. I am going to show you the almost unbelievable number the government currently pretends it is worth. And then I am going to show you why the moment Trump reaches for that $1 trillion, it becomes an official confession about the money in your own pocket. One that could quietly change what your savings are truly worth. Stay with me because this is not speculation dressed up as news. This is written in the government's own books, and it has a name, and by the end of the next few minutes you will understand that name better than most people on Wall Street do. Here is the twist, and I am giving it to you right now rather than making you wait for it because it reframes everything. The $1 trillion is gold. The United States government owns more gold than any nation on earth. More than 8,000 tons of it, and at today's market price it is worth well over $1 trillion. But on the government's own official books, that exact same gold is recorded at a price of $42.22 an ounce. $42. When the real market price today is over $4,000. Which means the government carries a $1 trillion mountain of gold on its books at a value of roughly $11 billion. Understating its own largest hard asset by close to 99%. And Donald Trump, facing a national debt of $37 trillion, is being told by people around him that simply correcting that number, updating it to reality, would conjure $1 trillion of value onto the nation's balance sheet overnight. That correction has a name. It is called revaluation, and it is one of the most important words in finance that almost nobody has ever heard. Before I show you why that word should matter to you personally, I want to know who is in the room. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and tell me honestly what you are holding right now. Physical gold or silver? Cash? Dollars in the bank? Something else? Physical? Hold that answer in your mind because by the end of this, the number I just gave you is going to make you look at it differently. So let us understand how this strange situation exists at all because the history is the key, and it takes us back to a single decision. For most of American history, the dollar was tied to gold at a fixed price, and the last time that official price was ever set, the number chosen was $42.22 an ounce. Then in 1971, President Nixon severed the final link between the dollar and gold, and that $42 figure was frozen into the official books as a pure accounting fossil, while the real market price of gold was set free to float. And float it did, climbing across 5 decades through the inflation of the 1970s, through every crisis since, all the way to over $4,000 today. But the government never updated its books. It still carries its gold at that fossilized 1973 price because to change it is to open a door that, once opened, cannot be closed. And Donald Trump may be the president who opens it. This is the part that turns a dusty accounting story into today's news. Within his administration and among the financial voices closest to it, there has been open discussion of revaluing America's gold, marking it up from the fantasy price to the real one, and using the enormous gap, that sudden $1 trillion, to help address the crushing national debt or to help fund a proposed government sovereign wealth fund. This is not something I am inventing. It has been discussed in financial circles tied directly to the administration. The tool is sitting right there in the vault, and a president who has never been shy about unconventional financial moves is exactly the kind of leader who might reach for it. Now here is why that should matter to you personally, and here is the threat hidden inside the accounting. Think about what a revaluation actually admits. For over 50 years, the government has told the world through that frozen $42 number that gold is a minor, almost irrelevant asset. To suddenly revalue it to $4,000 is to officially, publicly declare that gold is worth roughly 100 times what the government long pretended, which is really just another way of admitting that the dollar has lost that much of its value against real money over those decades. A revaluation is not merely an accounting entry, it is a confession. It is the government itself declaring in its own ledgers that the paper dollar has been quietly bleeding purchasing power for half a century, and that the ancient metal it dismissed is the thing that actually held its worth. The people who own that metal would be vindicated in an instant. The people holding nothing but dollars would be staring at an official admission that what they hold is worth far less than they were told. If you are finding this useful, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because now that you understand what revaluation is, I want to show you the two people standing on opposite sides of that trillion-dollar gap and which one of them you might be without realizing it. Let me make this real with two people. Neither is real. Both are the kind of person you might recognize, perhaps in the mirror. The first I will call Arthur, 70, careful, sensible, a man who has spent his life trusting official numbers because official numbers are supposed to be trustworthy. Arthur keeps the bulk of his savings in dollars, in the bank, in safe, fixed accounts, and when he thinks about his country and its money, he thinks of it as solid, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. What Arthur has never done is look at the gap between what the government's gold is worth on the books and what it is worth in reality. If he did, he would see the quiet truth hiding inside it. He would see that his own government, in its own accounting, has preserved a 50-year-old fiction precisely because the real number tells an uncomfortable story about the dollars Arthur has spent his life saving. Arthur trusts the official number. The official number is the fiction, and on the day a president finally corrects it, Arthur will be among the last to understand what it means for what he holds. The second I will call Miriam, 67, and she is not richer than Arthur and not more sophisticated about markets. She simply learned somewhere along the way to watch what the powerful do rather than what the official numbers say. When she noticed her government valued its own gold at a preposterous $42 while the world valued it at $4,000, she did not conclude the government was foolish. She concluded the gap itself was the message. That a nation quietly carrying $1 trillion of gold at a fraction of its worth was a nation sitting on an emergency reserve it did not want to discuss, held in the one asset that keeps its value when paper does not. So Miriam made sure a modest permanent portion of her own savings sat in that same ancient asset, not as a gamble, but for exactly the reason the government itself guards 8,000 tons of it in vaults. Miriam does not own more than Arthur. She owns realer money. And if a day of revaluation ever comes, she will not be surprised by it. She will have been quietly positioned for it for years. And if you think a government would never actually do such a dramatic thing, I want you to sit with a piece of history most people have forgotten, because it proves this is not hypothetical. The United States has revalued its gold before. In the 1930s, during the depths of the Great Depression, the government first required citizens to hand in their gold at a fixed price, and then, having gathered it, raised the official price of gold in one stroke overnight by proclamation by a large margin. In a single decision, it marked up the value of the gold it now held, instantly boosting its own reserves and giving itself room to act. It has happened in this country within living memory of the grandparents of people watching this. Revaluation is not an exotic theory. It is a tool that has been reached for before in exactly the circumstances of mounting debt and economic strain that echo so loudly right now. And in recent years, other nations have quietly begun revaluing their own gold reserves to market prices on their books. The door has been opened before. The only question is whether this president walks through it. Now, why do so many careful, intelligent people end up like Arthur, trusting a number they have never questioned? It is not stupidity. It is one of the best documented quirks of the human mind, and understanding it is the most useful thing I can give you today. Psychologists call it anchoring. Once the mind is handed a number, especially an official one, it clings to that number as its reference point and judges everything against it, even when the number is absurd. The government says its gold is worth $42, and some quiet part of the mind files gold under cheap, minor, unimportant, and never revisits the judgment because the official anchor set the frame long ago. Anchoring is why a 50-year-old fiction can sit in plain sight and shape how millions of people think about money without a single one of them noticing the anchor is a fossil. The most valuable habit you can build is to ask, when you find yourself trusting a number, who set this number, when, and what would they lose if they told the truth? Ask those 3 questions about the $42 figure and the whole illusion falls apart in your hands. Now let me be careful and honest because I will not insult you with fear, and this subject attracts fear peddlers like nothing else. A gold revaluation is not certain, it is not scheduled, and I am not telling you Trump will do it next month or that the dollar is about to collapse. The dollar remains by a wide margin the world's dominant currency, and the $42 figure could sit frozen for years yet. Anyone who tells you revaluation is a guaranteed event on a fixed date is selling you something and deserves your suspicions. What I am telling you is quieter and more durable. The gap is real, it is enormous, it is verifiable in the government's own documents. The conversation about closing it is happening at the highest levels, and it exists because the truth it conceals is inconvenient. Whether or not they ever formally close that gap, the gap itself is telling you something true right now about the difference between paper money and real money. And a brief word on silver because it lives on the same fault line. Silver was once official monetary money too, before it was demonetized and left to the market, and today it carries a dual life, part monetary metal with a history as old as gold's, part industrial metal consumed in vast quantities by solar panels and electronics and physically used up in a way gold is not. That makes it more volatile than gold, capable of larger gains and larger falls, the more energetic cousin. It would not be the direct subject of a government revaluation, but it moves in the same current, driven by the same slow erosion of confidence in paper that makes the government's frozen gold number such an uncomfortable thing to look at. For a saver near retirement, silver deserves to be understood as its own decision, with its own sharper risks, not folded thoughtlessly in with gold. So let us pull it all together and go back to that $1 trillion sitting under Trump's feet. The United States government owns more gold than any nation on earth, worth over $1 trillion at market price, and carries it on its official books at $42.22 an ounce. A number frozen since 1973, understating its own largest hard asset by close to 99%. Facing a $37 trillion debt, the Trump administration is part of a live conversation about revaluing that gold, which would conjure $1 trillion onto the balance sheet while simultaneously confessing that the dollar has lost that much ground to real money over 50 years. It has been done before in the 1930s. And the reason so many careful savers never see any of this is anchoring the mind's habit of trusting an official number long after it has become a fossil. So here is what I want you to carry away, framed as plainly as I know how. The most important thing about that $42 figure is not whether Trump ever changes it. It is what the figure reveals right now about the difference between what paper money claims to be worth and what real money is actually worth. Your own government, in its own accounting, keeps $1 trillion emergency reserve in the one asset it publicly pretends is nearly worthless, and it does so for reasons that say far more about the dollar than about the gold. This does not mean you should abandon cash or panic or pour everything into metal, because cash and stability matter, especially in retirement. It means you should ask whether you, like Arthur, have placed all of your trust in official numbers you have never once questioned, or whether, like Miriam, you have quietly made sure some of your savings sit in the same real money your government guards in vaults while valuing it at $42. The right answer depends on your own circumstances, and I am not here to tell you what it is, only to make sure you are finally asking the question. Do not let anyone use this $1 trillion gap to frighten you into a rushed decision or a costly product, because they will try, and they will grow louder. And equally, do not let the comfortable authority of an official number lull you into never asking who said it, when, and what they would lose by telling the truth. Those are different things, and the whole quiet significance of this moment lives in the gap between the fiction on the books and the reality in the vault. None of this is financial advice, and every figure I have cited, the $42, the $1 trillion value, the $11 billion on the books, the $37 trillion debt, is in the pinned comment so you can verify every word of it in the government's own documents rather than take mine. I open by telling you Donald Trump is sitting on $1 trillion almost nobody is talking about. Now you know what it is, where it has been hiding, and the single word revaluation that describes what happens if he reaches for it. So let me leave you with the question underneath all of it. If your own government keeps its emergency wealth in gold while valuing it at $42 an ounce, what does that tell you about the dollars it encourages everyone else to hold? The answer costs nothing to think about today, and it may cost a great deal to ignore on the day they finally decide to correct the number.